Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this old video, we're going back. Come on. It's the greatest decade, the 90s, and we're gonna yap away about a young'un named Christa Pike, the Pikester. Knoxville, minus the Johnny, Tennessee, is where we're at. Have a gander at what Christa was up to. Here's a hint. Weird stuff, and from there it actually gets even weirder, and it's like one of those sagas or something. Kind of just goes on and on and on. It is interesting though, I'll give her that. You got pentagrams, you got escape plots, and you got us giving it a go. So let's. In Knoxville, Tennessee, where we are today, about 175,000 people lived there back in 1995. One thing in particular, right, that drew all the various people in our story to Knoxville today, is in west Knoxville, there was a Job Corps. Job Corps is a free educational program for people, beyond their school years. Maybe they had difficulty in high school and dropped out, but they wanted to hit the books once again. You have to qualify for it. Mainly it's for people from low-income backgrounds, troubled kids finding their way once more. Now, the Job Corps in Knoxville, it's no longer there. It was torn down quite a while ago because it had kind of a reputation for crime. When they stopped doing the Job Corps in Knoxville, the crime rate in the city lowered. I mean, mainly due to, general crime, drugs issues, mismanagement, and it was shut down in April 1995, the building torn down a couple of decades later. The kind of final straw, right, that broke camel's back. The reason it was actually shut down in April of 1995. Well, we had a good few reasons already, but the major one is the one we'll get into. And so in Knoxville, just off Dale Avenue, that's where our story begins. Or rather, maybe a 20-minute walk from it, but we'll get there. In January 1995. As dawn broke on the 13th of January 1995, a husband and wife were out bobbing along, having a great old time jogging. They were jogging along the trails near the University of Tennessee, the agricultural department, and in some of the more remote trails that go through the woods and the parks. And as they were yapping away that crisp early morning, they saw something splattered across the trail. It was unmistakably blood. This was in a more secluded and woody area. They called for a groundskeeper who was working away to come over and have a go. And across the dead winter leaves, they saw that the blood formed a trail, leading into the grey, thickening trees of the park. Eventually, it led to a very battered and bloody corpse, semi-nude. The police were called and arrived. The crime scene was extensive, muddy, signs of a struggle. Blood and articles of clothing were found strewn about the place, broken foliage, footprints. A large pool of blood was found about 30 feet from the body, like she had been attacked, managed to fight off her attackers, run, and was then overcome, then dragged over to where she lay. The victim was nude from the waist up, the head bludgeoned, and was cut all over. The face mutilated, throat slashed. And carved into the victim's chests was a pentagram. So yeah. Yikes, pentagram. What is this, Rod Ferrell it's that bastard all over again. You can say that. Well, while this was happening, not too far away, over in Kentucky, he was actually having a great time. That's when his vampire clan was, they were having fun, doing their things in their little hut and, whatever. They thought they were cool. But this wasn't vampires. No. This was good old Satanism. Always up to no good. Krista Pike was born in March 1976. Virginia, the one on the left. And she didn't always have it easy. Her mother was mad, just absolutely mad about drinking and drugging. Her dad was more mad about just not being around. So kind of, fell to Krista's grandmother to raise her. Krista was, turning into a bright, lovely young woman under the tutelage of her grandmother. However, when Krista was 12, her grandmother passed. And so Krista had to go back to her mother, kind of went, down from there. It was a world of shit. Her mother introduced her to drugs at a very young age. She dropped out of school, was in trouble with the law numerous times for stealing, and eventually ended up in juvie. She was going to change her ways, though, and Job Corps was going to be her way to do it. When she was 17, she moved to Knoxville, stayed in the dorms at a Job Corps while studying in the University of Tennessee, and she was, she's planning on becoming a nurse. Or at least that's what her file said. She didn't really have much interest in, hitting the books. She was more interested in hitting the bricks with the lads. At the Job Corps in Knoxville, just off Dale Avenue, Krista met and fell in love with a lad named Tadarrell Shipp. This, would not end well. Tadarrell also had a rough upbringing in Memphis. He had dropped out of school at a very young age, got involved with gangs, but eventually, in an effort to turn things around, he ended up at the Job Corps in Knoxville, studying culinary arts. So he was studying culinary arts, he wanted to become a chef. Very good. And Tadarrell, he was a big fan of Hell's Kitchen. I mean that very literally, by the way. He loved Satanism, the devil, the occult, all that kind of weird shit. Him and Krista really bonded over this. They would have seances and chants and all the other stuff they do. He had a little shrine to the big guy downstairs in his room, and him and Krista would do the opposite of pray in front of it. I don't know. Him and Krista would be doing their chanting and all this other mad shit. People, their neighbors in the dorm would always say, "Hey, shut the fuck up." Krista and Tadarrell bonded instantly. They were attached at the hip. They did everything together as she became his little devil. Oh, motherflippin' MG. And so, when another woman named Colleen Slemmer, she entered the picture, it's when this story goes into, it puts the story in fifth. Colleen, she was from Jacksonville, Florida. She didn't have a particularly rough upbringing or anything, and was there to study computer technology. Krista did not like Colleen, as she thought Colleen was trying to steal Tadarrell away from her. Now, Colleen and all her friends, they denied this, but tried telling Krista that. And so, it was in early 1995, after they returned back, after the Christmas break, that Krista decided she just wasn't having it. Wasn't having it. And so, something had to be done. On the 11th of January, Krista was talking with a friend of hers, a friend named Kim. And Krista told Kim that she was going to kill Colleen because, quote, she just felt mean that day. When I'm feeling mean, I don't replace the toilet paper. So she was really... The next day, the 12th of January, at about 8 p.m, Kim would say she saw Krista, Colleen, Tadarrell, and another student, Shadala Peterson, who was friends with both Krista and Tadarrell and also interested in the old Satanism. The four of them left the Job Corps dorms together. About 2 hours later, she saw Krista, Tadarrell, and Shadala return. Colleen wasn't with them. Krista, she had lured Colleen out with the promise of puff puff passing the devil's lettuce. And things wouldn't go well. Krista would say she'd only planned on fighting her, bit of a slap around. This was to get her to back off her man, but she would admit to bringing a box cutter. The reason for the fight was, Tadarrell, to get her to stay away from her man. But not only that, Krista would say she had once woken up with Colleen standing over her with a knife, and that Colleen had been trying to provoke her, trying to get her kicked out of Job Corps. Shadala Peterson was lookout, and in the woods they fought. Well, I wouldn't say they fought. Krista beat the shit out of Colleen, and Tadarrell and Krista tortured her. Krista saying she heard voices telling her what to do. She slashed at Colleen with the box cutter, hit her, and when she tried to run, they chased her down and slammed a piece of asphalt into Colleen's head multiple times, fracturing it. That's like the short version of what happened. The entire event lasted about an hour of Krista and Daryl torturing Colleen and eventually killing her. And it was extremely gruesome. Krista slashed and slashed at her chest and neck, while Colleen begged her to stop. And every time she tried to run away, Daryl chased her down. And it took a long time for Colleen to die. Later that night, Krista went to the room of her friend Kim, and she told Kim that she had murdered Colleen, and she was laughing and singing and dancing as she did. Krista also showed Kim a souvenir she had taken. She had taken a piece of Colleen's skull. And so, Colleen was found the very next morning. At breakfast, around the same time as the crime scene was being set up around Colleen's body, Krista was mad to show off her souvenir, having it with her while she ate brekkie. She would also tell and show all of this to another student, saying that's not mud on her shoes, that's blood. How did she get caught? It was one of those students at the Job Corps. They called their mother, and their mother called the police. The investigation into the body that was found in the park, they hadn't even identified it as Colleen, was in full swing. The police found a list at the Job Corps dormitories of people who had checked out and checked in. Colleen only did one of those things. The three others who checked out at the exact same time did both. The police spoke to Krista, Daryl, and Shadala on the 15th of January. During the arrests, they searched the rooms and found the satanic shrine. Krista didn't deny it. In fact, none of them really did.
You know, it's harder to hurt somebody when they're talking to you and you have to see another person. Right. And I told her, shut up. And she was still breathing. I said, Colleen, do you know who's doing this to you? And she was just going, just talking like that. But I don't know what she was saying.
The most shocking thing to the police was the fact that Krista was the mastermind. You'll see it a lot. It's like, oh my god, she had such a sweet face. How could she do this? She even walked with investigators through the entire event, where they had dumped Colleen's clothing, where they had taken her IDs off her and dumped them in bins. She walked through, was like, yep, that's there. What else do you want to know? To Daryl, he denied being the one who really did much damage, though he did say he helped carve the pentagram, or the satanic star, as he says.
I thought they just were scared at first from the jump. That's what I thought. But when we got up there, everything changed.
There was a picture that was cut on her chest. Who did that?
I did half of that.
All right, don't tell me what it was.
It was satanic star.
Shadala told how she'd only been the lookout, and how days earlier, while she was sitting having lunch with Krista and Daryl, they had spoke about wanting to do a human sacrifice, sacrificing someone to the devil. Colleen made the shortlist. Krista, she didn't have to think about it twice, you know. They did this to, gain a bit of favor with the devil. That did not work out too well, unfortunately. All three were arrested and charged with first-degree murder.
The brutal murder of 19-year-old Colleen Slemmer created fear and speculation among students and staff Friday. Knoxville police quickly dispelled any myths about the case with a break in their investigation.
It did not involve a university student. It did not occur on the bike trail. It was not a random or a stranger-to-stranger incident.
Police say the murder suspects were close to the victim.
The motive of the crime appears to be a love triangle. It appears that both of the females involved had been involved with the 17-year-old male.
The victim's partially dressed body was found in this brushy area Friday morning. An autopsy confirmed she was slashed repeatedly with a meat cleaver and some other small cutting device, perhaps a razor blade or box opener. Authorities say she was then beaten over the head with a large chunk of asphalt from this pile.
Krista went on trial in March 1996. Shidala, who was really seen as someone who just got sucked in, she turned state's witness during Krista's trial. The prosecution, well, they had everything really. They had admitted it, and they had everything relating to how barbaric the crime was and how Krista kept part of the skull.
The injuries that Christa Pike caused to be inflicted upon Colleen Slemmer are almost beyond description. It was at this location that Colleen Slemmer was actually pleading for her life, and Christa Pike showed her no mercy. The body of Colleen Slemmer ended up in this general area right over here.
She was dancing around in a circle.
Who was dancing around in the circle?
Krista.
Dancing around the circle while she was telling you about this?
Yes.
Was she doing anything else?
She was smiling.
Making any other noises or anything?
She was kind of singing la la la.
The defense, well, she came from a broken home. She had a lot of issues. She had organic brain injury, bipolar disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder. It was on the 22nd of March 1996, after just a couple of hours deliberation, that Krista was found guilty of both first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. She was sentenced to death, becoming the youngest woman to be sentenced to death. Something else she had in common with Rod Ferrell, besides the occult stuff and the gruesome murders, being really one of the youngest people to be sentenced to death. Right? A match made in hell.
It is therefore ordered that you shall be put to death by electrocution in the mode prescribed by law, and that you shall be transferred to the custody of the warden at the Tennessee Prison for Women. And further, on the 12th day of January 1997, your body shall be subjected to shock by a sufficient current of electricity. Oh God, have mercy upon you. Mr. Bates, take Mrs. Pike into the house.
Can I please have my mom before I go?
Mr. Bates, please hold Miss Pike in the dock.
Please, let me just find my mom.
Please hold Miss Pike in the dock.
I love you. I love you. I love you.
But yeah, that's pretty rough when she was actually sentenced. Although, any sympathy I would have for her, you can just read into what she did to Colleen, and your sympathy. And then check this out, right? Days after she was sentenced to death by electrocution, she sent this letter to Darryl. Now, it was intercepted before it got to him. She doesn't feel too bad about it though. She's like, sure, shit happens. Hey love, I just want you to know how much I love you. I have 10 months left to live. Imagine that. I'd spend every moment with you if I could. Please write me. I miss you so much. You see what I get for trying to be nice to a hoe? I went ahead and bashed her brains out so she'd die quickly instead of letting her bleed to death and suffer more. And they fucking fry me. Ain't that some shit? Ain't that some shit indeed, Krista. As I said, this was right after she was sentenced to all Sparky. Darryl received life with the possibility of parole after 25 years. He was 17 years old when the event happened. Krista was 20, so that's why he got a lesser sentence. Shidala received probation for 6 years as she helped the prosecution. Now the story doesn't end there though.
I'm 22 years old and this is it for me. And there's just so much more that I wanted to do with my life than be sitting in a room by myself 23 hours a day. I should be out going to school or working and having fun with my friends. That's my mom and my stepdad. My cat Tigger, I just love him. I love my dog Ed. These are the only kind of stuffed animals we can have because we can't have the ones that are stuffed with things in them. They think we might hide something in there. Well, breakfast is at about 6:30. Then I get up when it's time to go outside and exercise. Come back in and go to the shower. Come back, and I'm in here for the rest of the day until I go outside tomorrow.
She's still on death row, 25 years later. But in prison, she's been pretty busy. So fair play to her. She appealed, changed her mind, stopped appealing, appealed again. She tried to get new trials, womp womp on that count. She requested to have her execution date sped up.
There's nobody that's going to take me out of this prison and send me to Disneyland to live. It's okay, Mommy.
But then would have her attorneys file arguments against setting a date. She's just taking the piss at this stage, like. She's still behind bars, and will be. In 2001, she attempted to murder again. Once you pop, you can't stop, am I right? A friend of hers in prison, a killer, started clashing with another prisoner, also a killer. And so, when in August 2001 a fire broke out in the prison, the three of them were placed together. Krista, she kind of had enough of it. She's sick of them like battering each other, so she got the shoelace out, started choking the other one. Guards discovered and stopped. But she got convicted of that. That was another 25 years for her, though she was on death row, so I doubt she kind of gave a shit. And then, in 2012, she attempted to break out of prison. Gas woman! Two men, who obviously had the hots for her. One of them a former prison guard, at the very prison Krista was in. The other fella, someone who had started writing to her. And well, he wanted her out. The plot was discovered before it got too far, and they've never actually revealed details of what they were actually going to do, but I think it involved bribing guards. It's a terrible idea.
I think I deserve to be in here for the rest of my life. I do, I know I do. I know I don't deserve to be out walking around with everybody else in normal society. I did something horrible that is unacceptable, and I realize that. But I don't deserve to die for the actions of 3 individuals when I'm only one person.
Krista Pike remains the only woman on death row in Tennessee, and as recently as 2020, an execution date was requested for her, 24 years after she got it. Extensions had always been given, her attorneys always filing arguments against setting a date. Not anymore, I guess. But no date has been set to date.
The state of Tennessee is looking to set an execution date for death row inmate Christa Pike. Defense lawyers say it's too early to set an execution date, arguing the Tennessee Supreme Court should commute her death sentence. The lawyers filed papers before the state's highest court yesterday. It's in response to the Tennessee Attorney General's office, who says Pike has exhausted all appeals options. Pike is the only woman on the state's death row. She is now 45 years old. She was 19 when it happened. So she's now spent more of her life behind bars than not. And so ends this one. It turns out, Krista should have spent a little less time hanging out in the school, showing off a piece of skull of a person. She had just murdered this person, bashed her brains in, literally, and taken a piece of the skull. She probably should have spent a little less time showing that off. And a bit more time, I don't know, being like what I was like in school, playing football, talking up hot chicks. What? It could have happened. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate taking the time to be here with me. Here, go on, I'll see you as always real soon in the next old video. Until then, please look after yourselves, take care. I love you. Mike out.